All right, students. We over to Archana ma'am, who will introduce Dr. Sampadanand Mishra ji, and then to Sampath ji.
Namaskar everyone, Bhartiya Pranam. I welcome you all in the morning session of today's spiritual retreat, and it is on the sixth question. We are honored to have Shri Sampath ji with us, who will enlighten us on the six questions. Sampath ji is a family for Jaipuria school, but yes, as ma'am said few minutes back, those who are new joinees, for them I am reading out his profile. Dr. Sampadanand Mishra ji, Director Sri Aurobindo Foundation for Indian Culture, is passionate about Sanskrit. He strongly believes that Sanskrit has immense potentiality to elevate the human conscious to sublime heights. Dr. Mishra ji has spoken at various conferences, seminars, and literary and religious festivals, both in India and abroad, on Sanskrit, Indian culture, yoga, and education. In addition, as a devotee of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, he is familiar with their writings and feels comfortable in delivering lecture on philosophy and practice of Sri Aurobindo's yoga. He is also closely associated with the members of the School of Philosophy and guides their Sanskrit teachers. Dr. Mishra ji has launched the first ever 24-hour Sanskrit radio called Divyavani, and is single-handedly managing the entire content since its inception in 2013. In the year 2014, Dr. Mishra ji founded Samskrita Bal Sahitya Parishad with the aim of creating, evaluating, and propagating children's literature in Sanskrit. The Government of India has conferred the President's Award on him for his outstanding contribution to Sanskrit. His qualifications include a postgraduate degree in Sanskrit from Utkal University, Bhubaneswar, MPhil in Sanskrit from Pondicherry Central University, receiving the gold medal for his excellent performance, and PhD from Utkal University on Sanskrit and the evolution of human speech. Dr. Mishra ji's achievement in his working life are also very impressive. The books written by him are fine examples that showcase the greatness of Sanskrit. In addition, in his efforts to revive Sanskrit, he has also produced audio CDs and multimedia CD-ROMs, which are a delight to the senses. Some of the major projects on which he is working these days are creating innovative Sanskrit learning materials for the children, transparent system of root sounds in Sanskrit, Vedic art of multiple concentration, and Sanskrit and speech pathology. This is God's grace on us that, sir, you are us to take us on the journey of six questions. Over to Sri Sampath ji.
Dhanyavad, Archana ji. We will be dealing with this topic, 6 questions. And before I go to the question and the real topic, I would like to share the screen now. So you have to identify and then tell me what it is. So are you all able to see it? Anyone can say yes or no? Okay, so what is it? And from here I will take you towards the whole context of 6 questions.
The answers are coming in the chat box, Sampath ji. Should I read them out?
Yeah.
I'll read them out to you. Most of them are saying Paramveer Chakra or Gallantry Medal, Gallantry Award.
Okay.
Most of them have said this.
Okay, so this is Paramveer Chakra. And Paramveer Chakra, so what do you see in the center is the symbol, and what you see around it. Anyone has any idea? What are those 4 symbols around it?
So somebody is saying Trishul, somebody is saying the lion, somebody is saying the trident. They look like swords. Kartike Pandey, Pranvi Shahi, Trishul, trident, Mitali. The lions of Ashoka pillar, Sarthak Mishra.
See, the lions of Ashoka pillar is in the center, but around it, what you find is the symbol which is not Trishul, but the Vajra of Indra, the thunderbolt of Indra. And why I bring this particular image, which has Vajra, thunderbolt of Indra, and do you all know who designed it? It was, in fact, designed by Savitri by Khanolkar. So she's not an Indian; she's a Russian lady, but took this Indian name, and she married to Vikram Khanolkar, so who was in the army, and she designed it, keeping this whole story of Vajra, because Vajra, it symbolizes two things. The first thing is that, like the Vajra has the power to protect, so we all are protected by these weapons, these forces. This is one symbol. But the original idea of putting this Vajra was to remember the sacrifice of Dadhichi. So each warrior is like Dadhichi. So they sacrifice their life selflessly for the nation. So to remember this, the Savitribai Khanolkar had put, to remind every time Paramvir Chakra is given, to remind that sacrifice of Dadhichi. So this Vajra, which was made out of Dadhichi, it is from here our story begins. Who was this Dadhichi? And then what happened, what connection Dadhichi has with Vajra? Now Dadhichi was the son of Atharvan. Now if you have heard that Atharva Rishi, who has given us the Atharva Veda goes by his name. So Dadhichi, he was Dadhichi's father. Now Dadhichi, so what happened on one side, that Indra went to Vishnu complaining about a particular Asura known as Vritra. He was very powerful. He is a kind of snake which used to suck water from the earth. So then drought can take place, famine can take place. So people used to die and the earth used to be dry because of this Vritrasura. And Vritrasura was to be killed. Now, no one had any clue how to kill, because Devas also failed. Indra failed in killing Vritrasura. So they went to Vishnu. Now, Vishnu told them one thing, that Vritrasura can be killed if the weapon Vajra is hitting him. And this Vajra should be made only out of the body, out of the bones of Dadhichi. So then Indra went to Dadhichi. Now Dadhichi was doing his tapasya in his ashram and then finding Indra. So he said, in what way I can serve you? So Indra said, now we need your bones to make Vajra. So then Vritrasura can be killed and the earth can be saved from various dangers. Now Dadhichi got ready. So he, cut his body and removed all the bones from him. So ultimately Dadhichi had to die. So he did everything perfectly. He sacrificed because he thought that if there is a greater purpose to be served, so, and my bones are of any use for that purpose, so I should sacrifice for that. But only one thing he did, he could not inform his wife that he is leaving his body and he is sacrificing this thing. And his wife Swarcha or Suvarcha, so she was pregnant. When she heard that her husband has died, so what she did, this is a little sad part of the story, but this is how it happened. So what she did, she cut her belly and then brought out the baby and then left it outside under a peepal tree, and then she became Sati. So she didn't want to live after her husband was left his body. So now this baby, who was to be taken care of, he was ready to come out, but somehow she caught the belly and then brought it out and then left outside. Now there was no one to take care of. So it was Dadhichi's sister Dudhimati who took care of the child and this child grew up eating the people leaves. So that is how he was named as Pippalada. And the 6 questions that you are going to know, these answers came from Pippalada, who later became this child who lived only on by eating the pippal leaves. So he became one of the greatest sages, and then he contributed. So most portions of Atharva Veda are like by his name, Pippalada Shakha, the Pippalada branch of Atharva Veda. Now this Pippalada is the person who is the seer of the Upanishad called Prashna Upanishad. Now by the name you can understand that Prashna means question. All of you who have written your exam in Hindi and Sanskrit and familiar with any Indian language, you know what does Prashna mean. So Prashna means a question. So every time a disciple or a seeker went seeking something or seeking a higher life, they went with certain questions to the Guru. And when the Guru found that the Shishya, the disciple, has some jignasa, some aspiration to know something, that is why he has questions, he is seeking answers to the questions, then he considered those disciples fit to be initiated into higher life. So that is why having questions is something which was considered to be a prerequisite, a kind of necessary condition for being initiated into higher life. Those who have those seeking element within them, so they have this intense aspiration to know more and more, and they keep seeking answers to these questions and try to find out who have those answers and then approach them and then get their answers. So this Prashna Upanishad deals only with 6 questions, and these 6 questions were asked not by one person but by 6 different seekers, young seekers, and the answers to these 6 different questions by 6 different young seekers were given by Pippalada. So now what happened? Who are these 6 questioners and why it is called Upanishad? Now, if you are familiar with the word, you must have heard the word Upanishad, you must have heard the word Veda, you must have heard the word the Gita. But what exactly the Veda is, what exactly the Upanishad is, what exactly the Gita is, what kind of content we have in these texts, how these texts are relevant to us in today's time. So these are the things which always keep like coming whenever we talk about it. So let's know a little bit about the Upanishads. So the Upanishads, so there are 2 words which I will utter. You can note down or you can remember. One is Brahma Vidya, one is Rahasya Vidya. Now Brahma Vidya or Rahasya Vidya. Now Rahasya Vidya is the secret knowledge. Now secret knowledge means it is not to be kept secret, but it is secret only when we go very deep in solitude or in silence, when we go very deep into the core of our being, core of the truth that we want to find out, then only this knowledge which is secret within us. So it is not something someone has kept hidden. All this knowledge or some kind of symbolism is used to keep secret this knowledge, but this knowledge is very much hidden within every one of us. So when we grow more and more conscious of ourselves and the core being of ourselves, this knowledge which is hidden by our own outer being, it is not someone else who is responsible for this secret, for this secrecy. It is we ourselves who are responsible. So this is what we learn from the Upanishads, that it is because of our engagement with the outer being, with the outer world, because of our bahirmukhita, because of our external moving aspect, so we don't come to know the knowledge which is hidden within us, the knowledge which is secret within us. So that is why the knowledge which is secret within us is called Upanishad, is the Rahasya Vidya. And that is also known as the Brahma Vidya. It means it gives us the knowledge of a Brahman. So this Brahma Vidya means like once we in silence, go deep within ourselves to find out what knowledge is secret within us. So, what gets revealed to us are three things. We become more and more aware of ourselves, we become more and more aware of what lies outside us, which is Jagat. So we have the Atma Jnana, the self knowledge, and we have the Jagat Jnana, what lies outside us, and this Atma and Jagat, whoever has created it. So we also come to have a glimpse of that creator, that supreme force, which is known as the Deva, the Ishvara, the Parama Purusha, Paramatma, Purushottama, whatever names are given to this highest reality. So that is what is known as the Deva Jnana. So self knowledge, world knowledge, and God knowledge. These three together make it Brahma Vidya. This is the content of the Upanishad, and every Upanishad has, deals with this Brahma Vidya or certain aspect of the Brahma Vidya. This can be approached from various angles. Some Upanishads take up the miseries of human life, miseries of the world, and then try to find out the key to how to get rid of these miseries, this suffering, this affliction, and then remain happy. Some other Upanishads take up, ask this question, who is this Brahman? So how this Brahman we can know, and then tap into the realm of the Brahman, so then we can utilize the energy of the Brahman to be in this world with the power of the Brahman. Some other Upanishads take up the question of life and death. Some other Upanishads take up. So in this manner, every Upanishad deals with a particular aspect of the Upanishad. And these Upanishadic texts, or the content of the Upanishad, so whatever we find in these Upanishads, they are not something completely new kind of text. So they are also, they draw inspirations, the light in the contents that we find, the truth in the contents of the Upanishad that we find are founded on the realizations that the rishis who lived even before the Upanishadic rishis, the seers and sages of the Vedas. So that is why the Veda is called the foundation of the Sanatana Dharma and the Vedic realization. So in the Vedas we find there's so many symbolic forms, so many gods and goddesses. So in Upanishads, it is all reduced to one impersonal Brahman. So there are not many gods and goddesses in the Upanishads. It doesn't mean that there are no gods and goddesses in the Upanishads. So they have their relevance, but everything is centered around that supreme reality, that Brahman who is impersonal. So this in brief is a little introduction to the Vedas and Upanishads, and the same experiences are translated into a simple and practical form what we find in the Gita. So Gita makes it very, very simple, the practical aspect of this deeper, profound, subtle-most knowledge what we find in the Vedas and Upanishads. So this is where Prashna Upanishad is one of the principal Upanishads. So there are around 250 Upanishads till date. We have it in printed form, but principal Upanishads are 12 to 13 Upanishads on which most of the ancient acharyas like Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, and other acharyas have made their commentaries, written their commentaries. So these are considered to be the ancient most and the principal Upanishads. So Prashna Upanishad, so like we have Isha Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, Mundaka, Mandukya, Prashna, Aitareya, Taittiriya, Brihadaranyaka, Chandogya, Mahanarayaniya. So these are the different Upanishads which are known as the principal Upanishads. So Prashna Upanishad, from which we have taken these 6 questions for our discussion today, belongs to this principal Upanishad. So till this point, if anyone has any question you can raise, I will answer, and then I can go to the 6 questions which we are going to discuss and the whole story behind it.
Shashwat wants to ask something.
Sir, so how many types of Upanishads are there? How many types of Upanishads are there?
See, there are types of Upanishads if you come, there are yoga related Upanishads, there are Shakti related Upanishads, there are, like Vaishnava related Upanishads, different deities, different groups of Upanishads are there, and all these descriptions which we find, like how many different Upanishads. There is a particular Upanishad called Muktika Upanishad, which lists 108 Upanishads and divide them into different categories. So, 4 or 5 categories that you have here, like the Yoga Upanishads, and then also like all these Upanishads are 4 primarily because these Upanishads are divided into like certain Upanishads which belong to the Rig Veda category, certain Upanishads which belong to Yajurveda, certain Upanishads which belong to Samaveda, certain Upanishads which belong to Atharva Veda. So the reason is these Upanishads are not separate texts, they are part of the literature. Say for example, like you have the Rig Veda Samhita, the original text Rig Veda. Then you have the interpretative text of Rig Veda, which is called Brahmana Grantha. So in those Brahmana Granthas, you find 2 more different kinds of sections. One is Aranyaka and one is Upanishad. So if the Upanishadic text is a part of a Brahmana Grantha or a Samhita, which is say Rigveda Samhita or a Brahmana Grantha of the Rigveda, so that Upanishad belongs to Rigveda. So this same way, broadly they are divided into these 4 categories, like Upanishads of the Rig, Upanishads of Sama, Upanishads of Yaju, Upanishads of Atharva. But later, so because certain Upanishads particularly deal with the yoga aspect, so they are separated as Yoga Upanishad. Certain Upanishads deal with the Shakti, so they are Shakta Upanishads. So in this manner, you have certain Shashwat, listen.
Yes.
So in this manner, you have certain categories, but the broad categories are 4.
Sir, one last question, sir. How many Upanishads are there?
There are around 250 Upanishads which are available today in print form. But Muktika Upanishad lists only 108 Upanishads. But the principal Upanishads are 13 Upanishads or 14 Upanishads.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, Ridhima Rana is asking that Brahma Vidya and Rahasya Vidya, are they the same?
8 minutes.
Same, yes.
They are the same. Thank
इसके
you.
अंदर डालना है।
Kumar Samyak says he also has a question. It would be very nice if children would type their question also. It becomes easier.
Sir, is there anything is the most important thing in Upanishads that we can exist in our life?
What is the most important thing in the Upanishad that you can?
Sir, relate in our life, like
Acha.
doing our work, like
Yeah,
that.
so there are, like plenty. There is not a single word in the Upanishad, a single sentence or statement in the Upanishad which you will find that not applicable to our life. So the content of the Upanishads, they have to be understood in their deeper sense, and then we know that every aspect of the Upanishad is very much relevant even today to put it into practice. For example, like most of the content that we find, it makes us aware of ourselves, and it makes us aware of the world outside, and it gives us immense knowledge about ourselves, about the world, about the gods, about the creation, how the creation was formed. So it is not just relevant for today, so for ages together it is going to be relevant. And there are simple things which from the like childhood we can put into practice. Say for example, in a very simple language, the Upanishadic Rishi says, when he sees off the student after the exam is over, when he sends back the students to the society for leading their household life, he says, Satyam Vada, speak the truth, Dharmam Chara, never deviate from the path of right, Swadhyayana Ma Pramada, never deviate from your study, never give a stop to your study, because the whole life should be a life of learning. So every moment is an opportunity for learning. Matra Devo Bhava, Pitra Devo Bhava, Atithi Devo Bhava. That see gods in your father, in your mother, in the stranger who visit to you. So in short it says, but the whole idea is that feel that divine presence in everything and being and happening. So these are the great lessons which are immortal lessons, immortal lessons from the Upanishads which are relevant for ages together, and every moment it becomes a reminder for all of us that yes, we have to follow the path of the truth, we have to follow the path of right, we have to feel the presence of the divine in everything being and happening. So what a great teaching. So who can say that like these are not relevant for me, or not relevant for this time, or not relevant for that time?
So there are two more questions. There is Sarthak Mishra who is asking what is the difference between Upanishads and Puranas?
Puranas come much later, where in a very different language, breaking through the symbolism in the form of various stories, linking it to the history, linking it to the dynasty, the story of the kings, their whole life journey, and taking resort to a particular like character, and then weaving the whole story around it and bringing in more stories, sub stories. So it describes the Vedic and Upanishadic experiences in a simple and practical term, but they come much later. So the Puranas, and they actually when we talk about the Hindu dharma, Sanatana dharma, so the most popular texts are Puranas. So but they're very exhaustive, they're very comprehensive also in presenting the thing, but in a simple language. But there are lots of exaggerations, there are a lot of other stories which we need to be careful, and the knowledge of the Vedas and Upanishads which help us understanding the Puranas better. At the same time, it is through the Puranas we can come in contact with the teachings of the Vedas and Upanishads. This is also true.
There is Sarthak Agarwal is asking what is the common goal of the Upanishads? Is it to give knowledge or to provide a guide to people or something else? What is the common goal of all the Upanishads?
Okay. So the common goal of Upanishads is to attain the Brahma Vidya. That is one line answer. And
Very
anyone you ask, so this will be the answer. The common goal of all the Upanishads is the Brahma Vidya. How do we know ourselves? How do we know the Jagat? How do we know who created this, the creator of this Jagat?
And one last question is from Ridhima Rana, who is asking what is the difference between Vedas and Upanishads. After that, we won't take any more questions.
So the first thing is like what is Veda we need to understand. So the Veda is a record of the profound realizations of certain aspects of the truth which was revealed to or which were realized by the ones who are called rishis, because the rishis, by the power of their tapas, so they were living in transcendental consciousness. They were not living in the ordinary consciousness, very higher level of consciousness or highest level of consciousness they were living. And in that state, whatever they realized, whichever aspect of the truth got revealed to them, so that the words of the Vedas are the holistic sense of those realizations, those experiences. Now, what are the Upanishads? Now, the Vedic language, the way it appeared to or revealed to the seers and sages of the Vedas, it was more of the symbolic form. And also in the Vedas, we find that there are various deities. These deities are the various faculties of our consciousness from a psychological point of view. Now, in the Upanishad, the major difference between the Vedas and Upanishads are the Vedas are more in the form of the description of the truth and the description of the different deities, and in the form of invocations and prayers. So the Upanishads are more of the contemplative nature. So we contemplate. Here there is a description, very concentrated description of what a particular thing is, what Atman is, what Brahman is, what life is, what death is, what the different parts of our being they are. So, and it allows us to contemplate and go deep more and more within ourselves. So when the Vedas gives us a wider understanding and then creates this sense of bhakti in us, and then acquaints us with the different faculties of consciousness, different powers and forces. So the Upanishads make us more contemplative and meditative. So then we can go deep within to tap into the secret forces which are hidden within us. So that's the major difference between the Vedas and Upanishads. But in a true sense, in a deeper sense, it is extremely difficult to make a waterline compartment between the Vedas and Upanishads. So in a profound sense, the knowledge is same, and it is spoken to us in different methods by using different methods. So we go to the story of the 6 questions. Okay, so this Pippalada, we had already told you about the story of Pippalada, who was the child of Dadhichi and Suvarcha. So this Pippalada, when he became one of the greatest teachers, so one day 6 young seekers. So I'll read out the names of these seekers. One is Sukesha, another is Satyakama, another is Gargya, the fourth one is Kausalya, and the fifth one is Bhargava, and the sixth one is Kabandhi. So these are the 6. I'm not putting it in particular order, but for the sake of separating them into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so I just mentioned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The Sukesha, Kausalya, Gargya, Bhargava, Kabandhi, and Satyakama. So these 6 young seekers one day appeared before Pippalada, and then they told Pippalada, sir. So we are saying sir, but during Upanishadic time, so they used to call the teacher as Bhagavan. Bhagavan, we have come here to know the answers to our questions, and each one of us, we have a certain question with which we are struggling to know. So can you reveal the answers to our questions? Now, as per the rule, the first thing, and everyone comes with Samit Pani. That is the description that you find. Samit Pani means everyone comes with a bunch of dry woods or a single piece of dry wood they will carry, because the symbolism is twofold. One is we are ready to take the trouble of doing the sacrifice, and then help me take the burden of doing this sacrifice, which is the outer rituals in the yajna, and everything that is needed for the outer ritual, we are ready to that, bringing the woods and then helping in all kinds of things. So that is one symbolism. The other symbolism of carrying a dry wood or samit is that dry wood is ready to catch fire. So we are carrying this dry wood with us because now we are ready to catch fire. And when a guru finds out that the student, the disciple, they're not student, they're disciples, because a disciple is always following a certain discipline. That is why it's called disciple. So without discipline, one cannot be a disciple. One can be a student, but not a disciple. So one has to follow certain inner discipline and outer discipline to become a disciple. So this disciple is ready to catch fire. That means he is ready to gain the knowledge which he is seeking after, or which is he is seeking for. Now with Samit Pani, with the dry wood, all these 6 young seekers, they're approaching Pippalada. Now Pippalada knows, Pippalada understands the intensity of the seeking of all these 6 young seekers, but he puts a condition on them. He said that, look, good that you all have come, but be here with me for 1 year. And this is what we find in many Upanishadic stories. Whenever a student, whenever a disciple goes, either a king or another rishi goes to another rishi for seeking something, or a king goes to the rishi in order to get answers to his questions or his doubts. So they are not given immediate answer, whoever he may be. So now the guru tells them that you have to be with us for a full 1 year, samvatsara, purna samvatsara, full 1 year. And what do they do in this 1 year? Now their patience, their control over their senses, their quietude, how much of silence they carry in the mind, how much of they're settled within themselves. So this 1 year is a time period for every one of them. It's an opportunity for them to prepare themselves for receiving the knowledge that the Guru is going to reveal. And this is necessary. If our mind is not quiet, if our senses are not under control, if we don't have patience, if we are living in the Bahir Jagat, if we are too much of Bahirmukhi, we are, externalized consciousness we live, then we are not ready to receive the higher knowledge. Even though we receive, we will not be able to hold in our consciousness. That is why to live near the Guru, live in an ashram, because there one is put into the test, and then one prepares oneself, sharpens oneself to receive this knowledge. Now these conditions were accepted by the 6 young seekers. It was not an imposition, because there was nothing like imposition by the teacher on anyone. So they happily accept the condition of Pippalada, and they are there for 1 year. So at the end of the 1 year, so the first person comes and then puts this question. So this is where we will know who comes first is Kabandhi. Now Kabandhi comes and asks this question. Look at one very important thing about the Upanishads, that we find that in most of the Upanishads we find these questions. They're filled in with questions because Upanishads are more in the dialogue form, in interactive form. The knowledge was not given like a lecture. It's not a one piece of lecture that you have to listen from the teacher. It was more of interaction. So the disciples were encouraged to have doubts, encouraged to put their questions before the teacher, so then he could answer to them through practical examples or by bringing in all the experiences that he has. Now Kabandhi asked this question, and also this important thing which I wanted to share with you all young minds, that at that young age, if you just make a study of the Upanishads to find out what kind of questions which were rising in their minds, they were very different than the questions which arise in our minds today. Now this young, instead of asking him, how shall I secure good mark, or how shall I secure a good job, can you guide me which university is good, or which profession can give me good job? So he asked this question. He says, where did all the creatures in the world come from? So he is worried about it, like how there are, this creation is filled in with so many creatures, not just human beings. That is why it is called the creatures. They're created things. Where from these created things come? How many things are created? The creatures are created. This is the question that Kabandhi is having. It is not that he doesn't have any answer to it. He has the answer to this question, but some kind of vague answer. He is not fully convinced. That is why he has come to the teacher. So sometimes we may be having certain vague answers to our questions, but it is always better to check with someone who knows, someone who has the experience, to check that whether it is the answers that I have in my mind, is it vague or it is a confirmed thing that I have understood it properly. So even though certain amount of answer the disciples had, they went to the teacher again and again to become confirmed that yes, their understanding is right, their understanding is clear, their understanding can lead them to the further knowledge. So now to this, what Pippalada answers. So the Pippalada says that look, it was Prajapati. The Prajapati is the name which is given to the creator. So he says it was Prajapati who is the creator of all these beings. So he held the entire creation within himself. He has that because he is omnipotent. He has that immense power of holding everything within himself. So he held the entire creation within himself. Now, when he held everything within himself. There was no creation. He was all alone. Now we know in another Upanishad also we will find when the story of creation comes. So it says, Ekoham bahusyam prajayayam. Now he has a wish, a will gets formed in him that he has to become many. So just imagine if the Eka remained Eka always, then he would have been someone impotent, that he doesn't have the energy, he doesn't have the potency to become many. So he would be considered as something important. But this Brahman, the supreme creator, is not impotent. He is all potent. He can become the entire thing and then he can withdraw the entire thing within himself. So this Brahman, this Prajapati, so when he had this will to create the creation or bring out so many things, so what he did so he gathered, he become more concentrated within himself, so certain kind of heat got generated within him. So that heat is called the power of tapas. So he did tapas. So when this heat got generated, now we know that for anything to create, we need the power of tapas. We need that heat, that that electricity, that fire, that the power of the sun, that light we need. Without light, without heat, nothing can be created. So when he concentrated himself and then became very heated, very powerfully energized, then he produced a pair of twins. So this is what Pippalada explains. So he produced twins, a pair of twins. So what are these? So Pippalada calls it, that explains Kabandhi in this matter. He said he created Rai and he created Prana. Now Rai is matter. So anything that we use in the form of even our body, even our mind is also matter. So it is that matter, Rai. Now he created also Prana. So now the matter was first created, then prana was infused into the matter to make it live, to make it move. Okay. So now these twins, then it said that Rai and prana can create the entire creation, and by the combination of Rai and prana, this entire creation will be expanded. Then I will enjoy myself by being in that creation created by Rai and prana. Now this is where the first question is being answered to the Kabandhi. Pippalada gives the answer to Kabandhi. So what is Rai or matter? Now everything that is that has a form is called Rai. Anything that has a form is Rai. Now prana is formless, but Rai is with form. Now, so anything which is even sometimes, as per this Upanishad particularly, the mind which is also formless is also called Rai, because mind can function when the prana is combined with it. It cannot function without the prana, without the form. That is also it's called, even the form and the formless both are matter. The matter remains just as matter unless and until it is infused with the energy, and that energy was given the name prana. Now it says that, say for example, like we have the moon. This is the example which is given in the Prashna Upanishad. He says that moon, even though it gives light to us, but it itself doesn't have any power to do. It gets enlightened, or it gets kindled, or it draws the light from the sun. If the sun is not there, the moon is absolutely deformed. It doesn't have any power. So the same way, so prana, all our energy comes from the sun, and the rest of the things are considered as the moon. So sun and moon. This is how the matter, the Rai and the Prana is described in this Upanishad. This is how Pippalada is answering to Kabandha's question. He said the moon is simply matter, but the sun is Prana. Now, for it is only when the sun rises and illumines the whole world, east and west, north and south, that everything comes alive. It is only when he throws his light, that means the sun throws his light on the moon, that she becomes alive. Then the moon becomes alive. So, Kabandhi, the sun is both prana of the universe and the Vaishwanara, the spark of life of every center. So, here another question comes that as whatever we find in the universe, in the Brahmanda, the same story is repeated within every individual in the Pinda. So that is why this is also we will discuss later in under the context of another question, that this Pinda and Brahmanda relationship, all the different kinds of prana, different kinds of pranic energy that we have within ourselves, the same pranic energy we find also in the universe, in the cosmos. So then we can relate it and then see how this Pinda Brahmanda relationship, how each individual is carrying the whole universe within, and the entire universe holds every individual within itself. So we are inseparably related. So that is why the Upanishadic rishis, they say, as per their realization, that if you want to understand the whole cosmos, just try to go deep within yourself and then understand yourself, because the cosmos is not in isolation, not separate from yourself. The whole cosmos lives within yourself, and once you know yourself, you know the whole cosmos. So that is why Atmanam Vidhi, know yourself, know the self, know the Atman. This was the the greatest commandment, or the greatest realization, or the greatest teaching of the Upanishads. This is where the Kabandhi was given the answer and explained about the Rai and Prana, the combination of Rai and Prana gives birth to everything that we find in the creation. Now the next question, we come to the question number 2, and each question, even though it is answered in a particular manner, can give rise to 100 other questions, because these are not merely any ordinary question. So any ordinary question can be like answered by giving one paragraph, one lecture, or certain presentation, or short answers to it. But these are the questions which are eternal questions, you can say, immortal questions. These questions give rise to various other questions in every ages. Like when man in its evolutionary journey progresses and then looks at the same questions again after 1,000 years, it will have completely new questions arising out of this question. The same questions that will arise in our mind today were not, they didn't arise in the minds of the students or the disciples of the Upanishadic age, because that age was different, that evolutionary stage was different. So the same way, these questions will always have its relevance and always give rise to various other questions pertaining to the core issue of what is this creation, who are we, how are we related, what is this universe, why am I born, what relationship I have with others, how should I live in this world, what is the ultimate aim of my life. So all these different questions are all related, but we need to see that all these questions, they arise in us, and very sincerely we try to seek answers to these questions. Now the second questioner is Bhargava. So he comes and then he asks, he says, like, there are various different powers, different gods. Now gods are described as powers and forces in the universe of our consciousness. So the Vedic and Upanishadic seers and sages, they did not look gods as completely different from ourselves. they saw them as different parts of our own being, different parts of our own consciousness, different parts of the universal consciousness. So they have a role at the for each individual. At an individual level, they also have a role to play in the cosmos. So the same God, they have a cosmic responsibility, they have an individual responsibility. So these are the different powers, different forces which are at work. So now this Bhargava is asking this question to Pippalada, saying that of the different powers and different forces that we have, and which one is the most important one? Now we do ask, this is a very general question. Okay, you say that there are so many Upanishads, but which one is important? You say there are so many things, which one on priority should I know? Which one is important? The same kind of question which arises in the mind of Bhargava. And then he says, of all these powers, of all these gods that we know, which god, which power is the most important power? Now, to this, Pippalada says that look, the five elements, the space, the earth, the fire, water, and air. Like we say, Kshiti, Up, Teja, Marut, Vyoma. The earth is one element, the space is one, space or ether is one element, Akasha. Up, water is one element, the Panchabhutas. Okay, so Kshiti means the earth, Up means the water, Teja, fire, then Kshiti, Up, Teja, Marut is the wind, the air element, and Vyoma, the ether or the space element. He says the five elements of which the body is made. Now this body that we are using, or the where our inner self, the Atman, is hidden, the secret, this body through which we do all our activities, is made up of all these five elements. And when the prana departs from this body also, it gets absorbed in all these five elements. So he says that the five elements of which the body is made, these are gods that support the body. Now for the body, these five are five different gods. This is how they looked at the different elements. So Vayu is one Devata, Akasha is one Devata, Jala is one Devata, Agni is one Devata. So all these five different deities, they support this body, because this body is made out of these five elements. Now it says, but the speech, the vak, and mind, the manas, the sight, the drishti, and hearing, the shruti. So these four, vak, manas, shruti, and drishti. So our speech and our mind and our hearing and our seeing, these four, these four are also treated as the four different powers, four different deities, which light up the inanimate body. So the mere body will not be of any use without these four gods. And sometimes in the Upanishads, these four, the manas, the vak, the shruti, and the drishti, these four are known as Brahma Chatushpat, the four legs of the Brahman on which the Brahman stands, or the four doors to the Brahman. It is through these we know the Brahman. All activities of the Brahman take place, hearing and seeing and the speech and the mind, known as Brahma Chatushpat. Now it says that these four gods, they light up the inanimate body, turning it into self-aware, intelligent. Without this, our awareness also will not, we will not be aware of ourselves, we will not understand anything, we will not have the intelligence. And they engage the being with the world. Now it says the Pippalada is now saying this to Bhargava, that look, let me tell you. So he is also narrating a story to to Bhargava for a better explanation. So he says that let me tell you a story about these four gods. As they appeared in the body, one by one, each one of them they boasted. The mind said, I am the greatest. The speech said, I am the greatest. The hearing said, I am the greatest. The seeing, the chakshu, the drishti also said, I am the greatest. I and only I. I am the true sustainer, true supporter of the body. Without me, this body will not remain. Now, hearing these, their arrogant statements, or looking at their arrogance, then the prana came in front and then told them that look, do not. So the prana says to these four that do not delude yourselves. Without me, without means who is saying? The prana is saying to manas, to vak, and to shruti and drishti. He says that without me, without my energy, without me being active, you all will have no role to play. You cannot even be present in the body. And I am present. He says, the prana says that like I am present in the body in my 5 different forms. So he says, without me, call me energy, life, breath, what you will, who is present in the body as 5 distinct breaths, the body would not survive. So then all the 4 gods, they mocked at him. They said, what are you saying? That we know our strength. The mind says that I know my strength. The speech says, I know my strength. The shruti says, I know my strength. The drishti says, I know my strength. So what are you saying that without you, we cannot function? Now he says, okay, look, I will now leave the body. Now let's see whether you all can remain without me or be functional without me. I will, the prana said, that he made as if to leave, proceeding swiftly upwards towards the Brahmarandhra. So Brahmarandhra means, like it is said, those who have experienced it, those who have moved out of their body and then come back and then possess the body. So they have said that it is from here, Brahmarandhra, that the prana can live. And when the death happens, so it is through this Brahmarandhra that the prana moves out. So when the prana started moving to leave the body, then what happened? These gods which were boasting of themselves, they said that now we believe you, that without you we cannot remain, we cannot do anything. So please do not leave the body. So be here. We call you as the foundation of everything. Pranaya namaha yasmin sarvamidam pratishthitam. So everything is founded in the prana. If the prana is not there, nothing will be animate, nothing will be functional. Now he says that, look, do not leave us. We cannot live without you. Now there is because these questions were there, the disciples had also discussed amongst themselves each of their questions, like they had decided that each one of them will be concentrated on the central question and then ask it to the Rishi. Now the Rishi goes to the third question after this. So the second question was like, which one is the important, and what did we learn? That it is the prana which is important, without which nothing can, even the mind will be deformed. Nothing of the body will work without prana. So prana was considered to be the highest among all the gods. Now the third questioner, Kausalya. So he goes and asks this question that, look, now about this life breath, where is it itself born? He says, you say about this prana. You have answered the question of Bhargava by saying that it is the prana which is the greatest. But what is the source of it? How does it work? Where from it comes? Where does it go? So what is the source of it? Now people are the answers saying that where from this prana has come, you want to know, and how does it enter to the body? Once inside, how does it divide itself also into the five distinct forms? Because this was also mentioned that prana says that I operate in the body in my five distinct forms. So you have asked all these questions. Your central question involves all these questions which I will be answering to you one by one. Now it says when Kausalya was asking, dividing his questions to Pippalada. Now Pippalada says that too many questions you are asking, but it's good. At the same time, I'm also happy to see that you have these questions. So he said, but since I know that you are a seeker, I will answer them. Why he says this? Because if someone is asking any unnecessary questions, too many questions which do not hold, which are not valueless, which are not the questions of a seeker, so the guru doesn't answer to these questions. So he says, you have asked too many questions about prana. That's good. Since you are a seeker, I will answer to your questions. Now he says, prana comes from the self. Now, this is another important thing. Though prana is considered in this body as the most important deity, most important power, but it has its source in the self, in the Atman. Now, it is an integral part of the self, Pippalada says. Just as a man and his shadow are inseparable, the prana and Atman cannot be separated. When the prana enters, when the self enters into the body, it enters along with the prana. So they are not, they're inseparable forces. So Atman and prana. So that is why when we say that uska pran chala gaya, matlab usse atma bhi chala gaya. So वही pran is almost synonymous with the Atman that we understand in this manner. So this is what Pippalada explains, that look, Atman is an integral part of the self. Just as a man and his shadow are inseparable, so the self and prana, they are inseparable. Both enter the body together through a path created by the mind. For the mind remembers unfulfilled desires from the previous lives and needs prana to bring alive a new body so that those desires can be fulfilled. So now it is again connected with the mind, because mind also is connected with our willpower. So it is that which remembers everything. So births after births. So it is the mind which remembers everything and then connects it, the being, the prana. So then whatever has not been achieved in the previous life is again worked out in the next life. So our whole evolutionary progress, whatever is done in our life, there is this element which remembers, and then it carries forward the work, life after life. Now for our convenience, we are putting all these terms, different terms, as mind or the Atman or the prana all together, but it is basically, when we come to Sri Aurobindo's explanation of all these things, so he calls that this core aspect, this core being, which is called the psychic being, which is our evolutionary being, which is the Antaratman, the soul in evolution. It is that connected with the mind and prana, so it carries forward our work, our evolutionary journey, life after life. So now it says, like, once inside prana, what happens, like once the prana enters the body, so Pippalada explains that it splits itself into 5 different parts. So it splits itself into prana itself is one, and then 4 other forms it takes in the body, so together it becomes 5. So once inside, prana splits, creating 4 other breaths to take charge of specific tasks in the body. Although we know that there is one prana, so that is why in my note I had written that your biology teacher must have told you that you are just one prana, but you will be surprised that there are 5 different pranas, even 10 different pranas, there are subtle aspects of the prana which are described in the Upanishads, but the prominent ones are the five ones. So which are these five ones? This is the main breath, the prana. It dwells in the eye and ear, mouth and nose. It is the life breath. So in these four, the prana remains. That is, it is because of the prana that the eyes see, the ears hear, the mouth speak, or the nose breathes. So in drishti, in shruti, in nasa, and in mukham. So in these four, the prana settles and then helps in the activities of these four organs. Now the prana dwells in the eye and the ear, mouth and nose. It is the life breath which allows us to see, hear, smell, taste, think, talk, and then we have the apana. Now we say apana. Now apana is the downward breath. So this downward breath, it presses down on the organs of excretion, reproduction. So that is why we are able to release, like we are able to urinate, we are able to, like pass motions because of the apana. Because if this apana was not there, it would have been difficult to pull things down. So this is the role of apana. So prana splits itself into apana, and its function is to move downward, pressurize, so then things can go out. Now in the middle of the body is the samana. So first is prana, which is in nose, mouth, ear, and eye. And apana is the downward breath, which lives mostly below the navel. And then we have samana, which is in the middle of the body. So which is the breath which stabilizes everything, which brings harmony, which balances everything that happens in the body. So, and it also is responsible for our steady digestion and then remaining us well. Now after this, so we have learned about prana, apana, and samana. Then we have the word vyana. Another part of prana is vyana. So this is the breath which travels, which is the distributor of the energy. So it is the vyana which diffuses the energy equally to every part of the being. So that is why the whole blood circulation, the equal distribution of the energy in the body takes place because of the vyana. Now this vyana, which carries this whole network of, it flows through the different channels, and which helps in like pumping of the blood in the heart, and also not just in the physical heart, but our spiritual heart also is connected with this vyana. Now the prana, apana, vyana, and samana, these four, they help nourishing the energy in our body. Now there is another aspect of the prana, which is known as udana. Now udana is the prana which is rising above. So prana which is rising above, rising straight through one of the channels, the one that leads from the heart to the head, is known as the udana. It is the upward breath. Now the downward breath is apana, and the upward breath is udana. Now which manifests at the time of death to convey the life breath out of the body to whatever worlds a man has gained through his action. So now those who have done good work, their life, they go to the good realms. Those who have done their evil things, so they go to the evil worlds. But these are again very complicated questions, like which ones are the evil worlds, which ones are the good world. So these are very complicated questions, and then we need more exposition, more time, and more contemplation in understanding that. But very briefly, this Upanishad describes that it is the udana which lives, which helps in departing the prana. Now whatever we see in this body, the prana, apana, Udana, Vyana, Samana. Outside the body also, we have the same Pancha Pranas represented by, like outside the body, the sun, which when it rises awakens the prana in every eye and is the prana of the universe. Now the earth, which pulls everything downward, is the apana. So because it has that downward force. Then the space, the element that dwells in the mid region, the antariksha, between the earth and the sky, is the samana, because it stabilizes everything. And the air and the wind that moves within this space, traveling through it, around it, and into every nook and corner, so is the Vyana, the distributor. So air, the wind is the Vyana. Now, and what of Udana? The fire is called the Udana because the fire is called Agni. It's always the upward movement. So the work of Agni outside in the universe is to raise the whole universe and then carry to the higher realms towards the next stage. So Agni, because of its upward movement, is also compared with the Udana in the individual body. So this is how we see, like whatever we contain within ourselves, the same things are there outside the world, and then in the outer world, the way things function, the same way the things function within ourselves. So what is the necessity of this vidya is that these Upanishads, they make us aware of the different functionings of these gods, different powers, different forces within ourselves and outside ourselves. So then we know ourselves, we have the Atma Jnana and we have the Jagat Jnana. And then both the Atma Jnana and Jagat Jnana, it leads to the Brahma Jnana or the Deva Jnana. This is how the Brahma Vidya gets completed. So now the fourth question, which was asked by Gargya. So he says that when I am sleeping, who in the heck is the guy watching and enjoying my dream? So what happens, like when we are sleeping, which is that part of our being which is awake and knows what is happening in our sleeping state? So this is the question which is asked. Now to this, people are the answers. He says that look, just as at the end of the day, the sun gathers all his rays into his golden disk, and only to send them out into the world again in the next morning. Look at the metaphor that he has given. Like when the sun is setting, so it gathers all its rays into its golden disk. The same way, when we go to the bed at night, it is again that energy. So he says, like our mind, Gargya, it is the mind, the highest deity in the body. It gathers all up into itself when a man sleeps. In that state, therefore, a man sees not, hears not, tastes not, smells not, feels not, eats not, emits not, enjoys not, moves not. So that is why we say he is sleeping. So in that state, everything is gathered like the rays of the sun is gathered into its golden disk. The same way, everything is gathered into the mind. So that is why nothing functions in that state. Only the fires of life, prana, which is the very breath of life, apana, which smolders constant and true, like the fire in a householder's hearth. So samana. So these different aspects, the prana, apana, udana, vyana, samana, only these, they burn in the sleeping city. Only the prana is awake and everything is gathered into mind when we are sleeping. So that's the answer that he is giving. Then he explains that with these fires, the yajna of life continues inside the sleeping body. The mind, which is the yajamana, the performer of this yajna, pours into it the sacred fire, the offerings of the in-breath and out-breath. So we just breathe in and breathe out. So that is what is described as the offering into the yajna. It is not just breathing in and breathing out, that it is offered into the yajna, and the mind does it as the yajamana. And the fruit of this night-long sacrifice, the reward of this yajamana, is the fifth breath, udana, which arises in deep, dreamless sleep and leads the mind to the Brahman. So, in the sense that since the Udana, the Agni, is always awake, the Agni is never sleeping. So, that is why it is known as Jata Vedas. That means it exists all the times in all spheres of our being, all spheres of this cosmos, and it has the awareness of everything at all times. So, it is this Agni which helps the mind to be united with the Supreme Brahman. When we are sleeping, so what it is indicating, it is not indicating about the ordinary sleep. Even though in ordinary sleep we are just sleeping without being conscious of anything, but what is referred to here is that there is a way that we can continue doing all our sadhana, our inner practices, even while sleeping. So that is why here there is a beautiful book which has been compiled by A.S. Dalal, who has taken these writings from Sri Aurobindo, and then he has put the title The Night School of Sadhana. The Night School of Sadhana. So even during our sleep, we can become conscious, we can grow conscious of the Agni within, all that is awake within, and then continue our sadhana. Then that period also is never wasted. But as long as we are not conscious of ourselves, not conscious of the different inner, the profound, subtlemost things which are operative and awake within our body, then it is just a wastage of time for us. So that is why we say like half the time of our life goes in sleeping. So another half is divided into different parts. We do something, we waste much of our time, but half of the life is wasted by sleeping. So this half of the life which is wasted by sleeping can be transformed into conscious sleep and a conscious school of sadhana. So that is where it is indicating in a deeper sense. But what is awake within ourselves is that Agni, that Antaratman, that secret most fire, that inmost being within ourselves, which has the knowledge of everything, which is always aware of things inside and outside, and it is that which watches what happens within our body when we are sleeping. Now, this if we go into the details, it will take much time. I shift to the fifth question, which is asked by Satyakama. It says, is that very difficult thing called meditation? And so he is asking this question, that what is meditation? That we are asked that the fire which is eternally burning within, because in the previous question also, like people are answering this question of like who is awake while we are asleep, who watches what happens in the dream. So he says that one has to grow and then contemplate and become aware of that fire, that inmost being. So one has to meditate upon. So this is where Satyakama asks, like, what is meditation? Is it so difficult to do? But how to do meditation? So this is the question which is asked to Pippalada by Satyakama. Now Pippalada says that, look, the question is little elaborate again, which the answer of Pippalada will make it more clear. So he says that when we are asked to meditate, we are asked to meditate upon the sound Om. And when we meditate, what should be our attitude? And also when we meditate upon this Om, what is the reward? What do we get? What is the result of this meditation? Now Pippalada says that, look, the sound Om is verily the Brahman. This is the Ekaksharam Brahman. It is both the higher one, the supreme universal spirit, and the lower one, on the self in every individual. By lower, it doesn't mean the lower in a lower sense, but it says the Supreme Brahman in its cosmic universal spirit and the Supreme Brahman in its individual form or Jivatman. So only by contemplating deeply on Om without distraction, man may reach either. So the way which is shown, like how do we become aware of this Jivatman or Antaratman or the Supreme Brahman, the cosmic spirit, is by contemplating, by dwelling over, by brooding on the sound O. Then he later says that one can contemplate separately on A, on U, and Ma. But ultimately, one should not have the sense of division that these three sounds are three different sounds. Because these three sounds, they represent the unity of consciousness. So that is why the Upanishad declares that it is the Ekakshara Brahma. Now he says that these three sounds, A, U, Ma, if meditated upon separately, then it cannot lead the man beyond. So the wise people, the sages, they meditate on all of them as one, and they meditate upon that as one unit of consciousness, as one unit of sound. So whoever does that by contemplating, by holding that within one's own consciousness, feeling the presence of these three sounds, the presence of the divine as one unity of consciousness where no division lies, so he alone goes beyond. He becomes free from all kinds of limitations. So that is why, like the mother, when she was giving a definition to Om, so she said, Om is the signature of the Lord. Now by this is a very simple sentence, but it's a very, very profound sentence which says that Om is the signature of the Lord. It means like without the sanction of the Supreme Lord, nothing can move, nothing can happen. So when everything has a stamp of that supreme reality, that mark, that stamp, that signature is nothing but Om. So when we contemplate on the Om, we have to carry this sense within our consciousness that it is that presence, that divine, which is present in everything and being. So to contemplate on Om, to recite Om, means to become aware of that presence of the divinity everywhere, in everything and being and happening. So then he turns to 10. So where he says the person, the seeker named Sukesha. So he says, he asked this question, O Bhagavan, Hiranyanabha, the prince of Kosala, once came to me and said, Sukesha, do you know the person with 16 parts? So Shodasha Kala is the word which he uses. And Sukesha says that when Hiranyanabha asked me this question whether I know the person with 16 parts, so I told him that I don't know. So this is what I now ask you, Bhagavan, if you can tell me who is this person of the 16 parts. Now this is another thing which is to be known, and why it is called Atma Jnana. But by knowing this, by becoming aware of these 16 different parts of ourselves, we become more and more aware of who we are. Now people are the answers saying that, right, look, Sukesha, look within your body and look within mine. Is the person in whom the 16 parts are born. And what are these 16 parts? So he says that, look, and these 16 parts are there in every created thing. So there must be something that comes into the body when I do, filling it with life, and lives when I live, withdrawing life. I must create such a thing. And when he does all these things, whether when he enters, when he leaves the body, so he is that person with these 16 parts. So what are the 16 parts? I read out the whole list. If you want, you can take note. So number one is prana, the life breath. And from the life breath comes the faith, the shraddha. So from which comes the earth, the prithvi, and then comes the water, the fire. So prana, then faith, second, third is earth, fourth is water, fifth is fire, sixth is space, seventh is air, and the senses, eighth is all the senses, ninth is the mind, and tenth is food. For everything, we need the fuel to grow and move for all these things. And from food came energy, and from energy, the 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 undertakings that we have, the different kinds of tapas that we undertake. Then the hymns we chant is the 13th, and the actions we do is the 15th, 14th, and the 15th one. And the world we do, the works we do is the 15th, and the works we do and we do not innovate, not the works, the actions we do is the 14th, and the worlds in which we live and the worlds in which we do not live, that forms the 15th part. And the 16th part is the names of everything in these worlds, for it is only once a thing has been named that it can stand apart from the others. So these are the 16 things which is possessed by the Purusha. And but just as rivers, now it says, it explains in this manner. So this is the last answer in the Prashnopanishad, which says, just as the rivers entering the ocean from every side lose their individual names and forms and become simply the ocean, so does the separateness of the 16 parts of a person disappear and become simply the person no sooner than the self is known. That one, the person, is beyond the name and form, and that is the immortal self which lives within every one of us, and we all are expected to grow more and more conscious of this self in order to make ourselves free from the limitations, and in order to become free from the cycle of birth and death, and become and have answer to all kinds of questions, because in the Atma Jnana lies the answer to all our questions. Now he says that, O Sukesha, and then addressing all the 6 questioners, he says that, look, grow more and more conscious of this person who is free from all its colors, all its answers in its pure form, and then only it becomes possible for you all to become free from the cycle of birth and death. Then all the students, how beautifully the Upanishad ends, is that all these students, they bowed down to the teachers and they sang, singing a praise, saying that, look, you indeed are our father who has taken us across the sea of ignorance to the other shore. So we pray you, and we pay our homage to all the rishis who have given us this knowledge by which we grow more and more conscious of ourselves, and we get rid of the doubts that we have in the process of our journey. So this in brief are the 6 questions. So you can take it up for a detailed study. Sri Aurobindo has interpreted this entire Upanishad, so his translation in English, which is there. And we also have come out with this Upanishad website where you can go and then study them in English, word by word meaning. You can listen to these verses and also see the Hindi interpretation if you are not comfortable reading the interpretations in English. So upanishads.org.in is the website address. So you can go through and then know more about the Prashna Upanishads. So thank you all. And then whatever questions you have, we can take it up in our afternoon session. But afternoon session has to be brief, because I have another session going on from 4 to 5 o'clock, where I will take 5 minutes break just to initiate the session and then continue my engagement with you, and then come back again to end the session and then see what are the questions and answers people have to pass it on to the speaker.
And the website is upanishads.org.in. Thank you so much, Sampath-ji. Very nice session. I think children will have to study more about it to really understand it deeper. But it was very beautiful. So thank you, Sampath-ji. Thank you very, very much for an enlightening session. We would need, I'm sure the children will have many, many questions. So
Thank you.
let's
Sir.
see
See you
what
at
we are
3
able to,
o'clock.
what we are able to cover in the afternoon.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Children, stay on. Teachers, stay on. Promini ma'am has something to share.
Good afternoon, Anjali ma'am, all the teachers and children. This session had a lot of things, which we are not aware of. It was not a session which had a general kind of talk. Very many specific things were there, which if you really listen to them, I was actually initially telling you that I was finding it difficult. Then I started noting down everything and I made my Word document. And I felt that this can easily be related to the other sessions that we've done so far. And one very important thing, when Sampath-ji was speaking, I was thinking we can easily go back to the story of creation. And he has actually told us about this. So children, if you could just raise your hands and show a thumbs up, children and teachers, how many of you would like to know the story of creation? How many of you would like to know the story of creation? Teachers as well as children. Okay, Shanya, Om,
Sarthak Mishra.
Shashwat. All right, you want? Kanika ma'am is there.
Sparsh.
Sarthak Mishra. A lot of people are there. But for this, we'll have to make a request to Anjali ma'am. I don't know. Okay, I don't know the story of creation. I've seen it, I've heard it, and it is a beautiful. It was done very beautifully in our spiritual retreat earlier. But it is to remember things, we have to keep repeating them. So Anjali ma'am will get back to us on this when she'll be free to do the story of creation.
We'll do it, ma'am. Now there's a long period ahead of us when we are all homebound, just staying at home. Let us use this period to enrich ourselves as much as we can. Spiritually, especially, academically, the school is doing. Let me put in whatever little bit I know. And yes, I'd be happy to do the story of becoming. I would be happy to pair it with the story of evolution, because both must go together. So these are two things that we must do together.
Thank you, ma'am. And children, there is another request to all the teachers and children. Please reflect upon whatever we've done these 3-4 days. It is very essential to reflect upon this, to arrive at that specificity and eventually to bring about a change in us. If it is just like a lecture that we've heard and we've finished off, it will not take us anywhere. It will come to us in bits and parts, but it will not become a part of us. And we all forget. It is not that we don't forget, we all forget. So if you can internalize it, if you can try recollecting and write your own points so that you get the maximum out of it. These sessions were there on Facebook also. Unfortunately, today there was some snag in Facebook, not at our end, but their end. So you'll not be able to see it live on Facebook, but we've done the recording, we'll put it on Facebook. So please look at them, and very soon we'll be sharing them on YouTube as well. Look at them, come back to them, and in the last session that we have, please come back to us with questions. Think about what you want to ask, whatever gaps in learning are there, and your own things that you feel have not been answered. Children, please think about all this. Think about what is that which you did not understand, and what is that you are curious about. If we have the answers, we'll surely give them to you. You can send the questions to us in the spiritual retreat group. You can send the questions to us today after Sampath-ji's session, or you can send a mail to me at principal@jaipuria.com with your questions. Okay. Our
And
aim is that we get maximum out of all this. And this lockdown period becomes a great learning experience for all of us.
And if anybody would like to give a synopsis of what they've understood of the sessions, or if somebody wants the synopsis to come from us, I mean, at least my 3 sessions, what was the mental, how do you grow in your mental consciousness, those 5 questions, we can go over them. How do we grow in our vital consciousness? What is it? What were those 5 questions? How do we grow in our physical consciousness? What were those 6 questions? If you want to repeat that, what is spirituality? Those 6 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you would like a synopsis again, we would be very happy to go through it again. If you would like to give the synopsis, it would be even nicer. So that's what the closing session is all about going through what we have learned in these 5 days and again summarizing them and learning the essence of it and letting that essence establish itself in our whole being.
One little thing, one request to children. Children, I have noted down the first 3 questions, the 5th and 6th, but somehow my notes on the 4th question are not very clear. So is there any one of you who could send me what you've noted down or what you've understood from the 4th question? Any one of you children? Anybody who would like to share with me? All right. In case you can share with me, I'll only be too glad. Please send it to me at principal@jaipuria.com. Right?
The 4th question, ma'am, was asked by Gargya. And the question was that when I'm sleeping, who is that guy who's awake? Who is enjoying my sleep and who's enjoying my dream? So, because nobody did a thumbs up that they'll share with you, so I'm
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank
So,
you, ma'am.
and
Yeah.
people had said that just like in the evening, the sun gathers all its light back to give it again the next day. Similarly, at night, our mind, which is our highest deity, gathers all its senses inside itself. Then what keeps alive? What is listening? What is listening to the sleep? What is seeing the dreams? What is experiencing the dreams? So then he says that Agni never sleeps. We've talked about the psychic being yesterday and day before. The psychic being never sleeps. The psychic being is the Jata Veda, that which knows all that is born. And that psychic being keeps awake and it listens and sees and experiences the sleep and the dreams. That's what he said.
So you have to be conscious even in sleep.
Yes, the mother has spoken copiously about conscious sleep, that we don't fall into an unconscious sleep. She said before going to sleep, you must remember the psychic being and ask it, request it, invoke it, that keep in front and keep me conscious during my sleep. There are people who remember their dreams very clearly because they are conscious even when they are asleep. So, yes.
People who don't see dreams.
No, they see dreams, but they don't remember them at all.
Okay, so I mean that means it is essential that everyone sees dreams.
Not essential, but mostly we are able to see dreams. We see dreams, but we forget because we are not in a conscious sleep. Mostly, nothing is a thumb rule.